Hello, I'm Peter Marsh, and this is another Aether and ATX video. I'm recording this real early in the morning. I'm trying to be quiet because I'm in my house. I don't want to wake anyone else up. But today's video has everything in it. This is probably going to check off a lot of boxes for people that are into manifestation because they seem to be into a lot of these things. This video has filmmaking, superheroes, The Matrix, 9/11. It's got a lot. You'll see. Okay, so let's start walking down this path. When it comes to manifestation, I always talk about in these videos, and people that I would consider manifesting teachers always talk about the effect of the imagination on our 3D tangible world. That what we imagine inside affects the world around us, right? The way that we view ourselves inside in our imagination affects how we act in the 3D tangible world, and that affects how other people interact with us, and it affects the world around us. So when I think about my imagination, when I think about our subconsciousness that we have, I think about the imagery that I use. Where does that imagery come from? I personally like to write science fiction, I like to write horror, I like to write fantasy. In my mind, I might come up with new concepts, new characters, alien worlds, new places. But when I'm imagining it, it's not like I'm imagining something that I've never seen before. I might be trying to describe something I've never seen before, but in my mind, as I'm imagining it, I'm using everything that I've consumed within my lifetime. So I might, for example, because I love comic books and superheroes, I might come up with my own superhero. But the imagery in my mind is all based upon existing comics that I've read, superhero movies that I've watched. So that's the source, and then I'll cherry pick certain things from those movies, those comics, and I will create my own original character. I couldn't imagine that original character from scratch, from nothing. I couldn't pull them out of a vacuum, but I'm able to take all these different things that I've consumed in my life and make this specific character. Now, there's many things that I've consumed without even realizing it, because there's information coming to us through all of our senses constantly, and we choose to focus on certain things. But regardless of whether I consciously focused on something or I just, observed it through my senses unconsciously, it's still in there, right? It's in my inner world, it's in my imagination. Now, where this starts to get exciting is to think about how we're all doing this. All humanity is doing this at the same time. We're having our individual experiences. We're also having collective experiences, like we're all watching the same movies, watching the same shows, listening to the same music. And it is filling up our imaginations. And then for those of us that are creative, that make artwork, that tell stories, that make movies, we are then drawing from that imagination to create something new. So I wanted to talk about how we're all kind of having similar experiences. For each generation, we have specific experiences. I am a millennial. I'm kind of one of the, early millennials, where it's sort of like still a little bit of Gen X, and then, we become millennials. I thought I was Gen X when I was growing up, but apparently I'm a millennial. And millennials have a different experience than people in Generation X, and then Generation X and millennials have a different experience than baby boomers, or the boomer generation. And then the people beyond us, like my children, have a different experience than I do. And this, of course, is based on historical events. It's also based on the technology of the time. It's based on the way our culture is working at the time. So for my generation, for instance, for millennials, having a television in the house, having a TV on frequently throughout the day was just a common thing. And then once I reached my teenage years, having a computer in every house was a common thing. And then eventually it became, having advanced computers was a common thing. Then it became having cell phones, and then it became doing everything you could do on a computer, you could do on your cell phone. So these things happened within the course of my lifetime, and that affected my individual experience. And that's what makes my experience different from Generation X, and it makes our experience different than the baby boomer generation. So now let's tie this into filmmaking, storytelling, and our collective unconsciousness. So when I was growing up, the films that I was watching were made by boomers. They were people that, I mean, of course, there's film going back to the beginning of cinema, from all different generations, but like the movies that were coming out in my present as a child, those were made by people that were boomers, and they had specific experiences, and they consumed specific imagery when they were growing up. So they're consuming this specific imagery when they're growing up, and then they are making the movies, they're making the TV shows, they're making the music, they're writing the comics, they're writing the novels that we are consuming as we're growing up, right? So, I mean, just think about, like, here's the cliched examples, but like Star Wars, E.T., Jurassic Park, these things that were like fundamental movies that came out during my childhood have obviously like impacted my imagination and what I consider to be a good movie, a good experience. And it's done that for filmmakers that are of my generation. And the people that are of my generation are the ones that are making the movies right now that the youngest generation is consuming. So it's this cycle that just keeps going on and on and on, right? A generation grows up, they consume the media that's created by the previous generation. There's imagery that just repeats itself over and over and over again. And, we make films and we make novels and we make comic books and all this other kind of media based on what we've consumed. That's the imagery that we draw from when we imagine something ourselves. So, I talk about this often with people in general, but I don't think I've done it on this channel yet. But one thing that's really important is the media that was coming out when I was in my teenage years, right into adulthood. So by 1999, I was 16 years old. There are 3 movies that came out in 1999, 2 of which came out like within weeks of each other. So the movies were American Beauty, The Matrix, and Fight Club. And I believe American Beauty and Fight Club came out like really close to each other. I remember going to see one in the theater, then running into my friends, and then going to see the other one that same night. Now, I bring up these 3 movies because even though they're very different in a lot of ways, they're very similar in a lot of ways. American Beauty, Fight Club, and The Matrix, they all ask the audience to question their lives, to question reality. Why am I motivated by this? Why is this important to me? Why do I listen to these people? What is my goal in life? These are all like pretty deep questions that each of these movies ask. And for the most part, each of these movies recommend that you rebel against the system, that there's something wrong with the system, there's something wrong with your daily routine, and it's your job to question it and to do something different to change your life, right? Now, The Matrix itself is like such a major, major example. I'd say more often than not that when I watch manifesting videos, when I'm researching manifestation, people reference The Matrix all the time. They always say, we're living in the Matrix. It's a simulation. Everything's a simulation. Some people take it to a very literal extreme where it's like we're in a computer simulation. Other people say that it's basically like our collective reality that we make. It's an illusion. So the Matrix is referenced more often than not in manifesting media, I guess you could say, right? Now, the Matrix itself is this great example of filmmaking. There's all these different genres that come together to make the Matrix, right? The Matrix itself, like the Matrix construct, has this noir feeling to it. So it's inspired by noir films. The Wachowskis were clearly inspired by like the noir aesthetic when they made the Matrix. Then there is all the cybernetic stuff, all the robotic stuff. It's like that cyberpunk vibe. They were clearly influenced by that subgenre. Then there's all the Hong Kong martial arts films that inspired the Wachowskis, and that's used in all the action parts of the Matrix. There's so many different aspects, but of course we also have to talk about the philosophy. The Wachowskis read a lot of philosophy, and they injected it into the screenplay for the Matrix as well. So there's all these different components, and of course comic books were also a big influence on the Matrix. and they bring all these different elements, all these random sources together to make the Matrix. And it was just like a jolt to our collective consciousness. It blew people's minds back in 1999, and it still has an impact on filmmaking. It has an impact on our culture, right? So I want to use one part of filmmaking to make this next point, and I kind of want to tie it all together. So filmmaking itself is such a great metaphor for manifestation. Bashar often uses the idea of film as a metaphor for manifestation. He's saying that basically every single moment we're able to choose the reality that we want to live in, and every single moment is like a single frame on a reel of film. Now I realize that that reference is kind of dated at this point because we don't use film reels anymore. We use digital. But essentially, for those of you that aren't aware, I mean, I'm sure everyone is, but just for those of you that are really young that don't know, film used to come on these reels, and it would go through a projector, and it would go at a certain speed that all the still photographs that are taken by a camera would be projected on screen, and it's so quick that it's seamless to where it looks like it's just moving in real time. So I like this metaphor for manifestation because it's basically saying that like we are constantly creating our reality, we're constantly creating this image, and we're doing it so, it's like so constant that it feels like it's moving in this linear fashion, right? This real time. Now, I bring up all of this because I want to talk about montages in movies. Montages, I feel like, are like the culmination of our creative outlets in life. You know, like when you make a montage in a movie, you're incorporating all these different artistic elements. The actor's ability to act, right? That's one part of it. The cinematographer's view of the world, right? The music that is playing in the background, because montages pretty much always have some specific song playing in the background, whether it's a song that's made by a band or whether it's part of the film score, right? Then we have the screenplay, the writing aspect of it, where someone has written what happens in this montage. They've written the dialogue. So there's all these different forms of artistic expression coming together to make this one moment, which is a montage. And montages, pretty much for the most part, are there to show time passing and a character going on a journey of some sorts. Sometimes it's a literal journey where the montage is someone traveling from one area to the other. There's all these different little mini scenes that are happening within less than a minute. There's one song playing and a character is going from point A to point B, right? Indiana Jones is a great example, right? Like you see the plane going behind like a transparent map, and you're watching his progress on the map, and then you're showing him in different locations as he's traveled. Right now, in our collective zeitgeist, our consciousness, we are really into superhero movies. It feels like we're kind of at the tail end of that, and we're going to be into another genre soon. But superhero movies are filled with montages. Often those montages are like training sequences where someone is developing a new skill. They're developing a new power. They're becoming more powerful, right? Rocky IV, like the most of the movie is montages, right? And it's him preparing to fight Ivan Drago. Montages work in film because you're able to take something that would take hours, days, weeks, months, and condense it into like 30 seconds of storytelling. And I think that, for me, montages often evoke a sense of wonder. Now, bringing it back to Bashar's formula is always about doing the thing that you're most excited about and doing it to the best of your ability. That's basically how you figure out who you are, and that's basically how you change reality, and that's how you should operate in life. For me, I think that the most excitement I get is when I experience wonder. I think that wonder is kind of the guiding force of my life. And often I neglect it, or out of cowardice or laziness, I won't follow it. But the feeling of wonder kind of surpasses every other feeling that I have. And I think that wonder itself, for humans, the idea is that wonder is the excitement of experiencing something you haven't experienced before, but you want to experience it, right? And wonder is like that feeling right before you experience it, and it's the feeling when you experience it. So just an example, let's just say that I wanted to go see a band. I was really excited about seeing a specific band. And so I would feel that sense of wonder going to the concert venue, seeing the audience, seeing the artwork for the band, that excitement would be building up in me. And then the band would come out and play, and they'd do this amazing job. And I would just get transfixed by the music. I'd be feeling that sense of wonder. I think that movie montages often fill audiences with wonder, right? So a montage is important because it shows like character growth, and it's like instantaneous. And bringing it back to the Matrix, like think about how there's a montage sequence in the Matrix when Neo becomes a martial artist, right? In the Matrix, the way it works, and this is kind of like a metaphor in itself, they're just able to download programs and change who they are and develop these skills like instantaneously. He just gets martial arts, downloaded into his brain. He goes like this, and he's like, I learned kung fu, or I know kung fu, right? So in these montages, we see characters change, and it's like instantaneous. And I think that gives us a sense of wonder. We think to ourselves, oh my God, if I do this, I could change. And oh my God, look how quickly this person changes within this montage, right? So this all connects. I'm going to make this make sense, okay? But right now, the dominant genre in movies, whether good or bad, is the superhero genre. And it's kind of on its way out. And one of the main movies people reference is Iron Man. In the first Iron Man movie, there's multiple montages. And a lot of those montages are based on Tony Stark. He is in the desert. He's building an Iron Man suit so he can escape from his captors. And there's a montage of him and his partner building that very first Iron Man suit. He makes it back home. It's part of the hero's journey. He returns home, and he starts to make a new advanced Iron Man suit there. Another montage, right? We're seeing this character make progress over time. So these montages, they are things that we are absorbing as a collective. The first Iron Man movie was a massive hit. The Matrix was a massive hit. And so we are just consuming this and then other media in that same genre over and over again. There's so many superhero movies, right? And you see the same imagery over and over again, right? Like think about in Deadpool, they make a joke about the superhero landing or the superhero pose, right? Where like a superhero character comes into the frame, they slam into the ground, usually their head's down, their knees on the ground, then they lift up their head and they get up, right? And that's such a cliche, and it's something that we've seen so many times. I will watch montages on YouTube, and it'll be just literally just superheroes doing that landing, right? So that imagery is just constantly being fed into our consciousness. And then when we go to imagine something ourselves, we have that imagery in there. So it's like a snake eating its own tail. And I'm going to try to say this at 6 o'clock in the morning. Ouroboros, right? Snake eating its own tail. It's a circle, right? We consume this media where we see this one thing. We see it over and over again. It goes into our imagination. We then use that imagery to imagine something new. And then we make the media that has that imagery in it, just a new form of it. Luckily for us, there are filmmakers that have more discerning tastes, and they're not just consuming mass media pop culture. They'll be like, okay, I'm going to go watch a bunch of foreign films, or I'm going to go watch something from this director that's not mainstream. I'm going to watch movies from this different time period, like not the movies I grew up watching, but I'm going to watch something from earlier. So they're getting all these different sources, they're getting this different imagery into their minds, and then they're making new movies that are filled with different types of imagery than what we're expecting. So their little influence, right, their little drop of water into our collective consciousness, our pool, it adds like a different flavor, or adds like, a different kind of experience. So we're very lucky to have those people that actively choose to seek out something different to bring into their own consciousness, and then they themselves create art and add that to our collective unconsciousness. It's really exciting stuff. So last but not least, let me bring this, back to 9/11. I mentioned that at the beginning of this video. So at the beginning of this video, I mentioned how American Beauty, Fight Club, and The Matrix all came out within the same year, and they all came out when I was 16. This is 1999. So in 1999, at least in America, so much media was about questioning authority, questioning why we do things, questioning reality. Rage Against the Machine was one of the biggest bands in the world. The X-Files was one of the biggest shows on television. It was all about questioning authority and wondering why we do things. So, as a generation, that's what we're experiencing. And then 9/11 happens. And 9/11 happens, and it fundamentally shakes everyone, but especially people from my generation, because we're like young, and it's happening right there. I was in my first year of college when 9/11 happened. And there was a shift. Because of our external experience, there was a shift in our internal experience to where we were questioning everything, right? And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, we could lose everything. The status quo could change. And so it then became, we want to preserve the status quo. We want to keep things the way that they are. And that's what superheroes do, right? They protect the status quo. They reinforce the status quo. And so that's what the dominant media has been in our culture for like 24 years. Like since 9/11, it went from questioning things and wondering what we're supposed to do, what's our reality supposed to be, to, oh God, we got to preserve this reality. Luckily, we have these superheroes that can preserve it. And that's been going on. And the superhero imagery has just been going into our brains over and over again. And then the next generation of filmmakers, they're inspired by that imagery. So it's that circle, that Ouroboros. So I don't know if there's necessarily a lesson to be learned from this, but to me, I felt like it explained a lot, and it also is just always good to kind of take that step back and look at things from the outside. And I think that when you think about, well, I always kind of see this image, this kind of shot, or this kind of sequence in a movie, like, this is the reason why. It's because of what we consume, and then the filmmakers take what they've consumed, the imagery they've consumed in their mind, and then they make something, and it's all derived from what they saw before. And then we're very lucky that there are people that make that extra effort, that go further. They go and they consume different types of media so that they can make a different kind of product. And then the thing that they make affects us as a collective. They bring something new to the table, and it gives us a new perspective at looking at things. So I guess the main takeaway from this video is we should always be questioning things, just like the way that we were before, in the late 1990s, before 9/11, where it's like we want to look at things from a different perspective. We want to get different sources, for our imagination. And then hopefully that'll make us create new things. But I just think that in general, filmmaking is such a great metaphor for manifestation. Oh, here I can actually tie it all together. Sometimes going to a different source, stepping outside of your regular routine, your status quo, going somewhere else can give you the information you need, the inspiration you need to change who you are. It can feed that sense of wonder because it's something that you've never done before. It's something new, and it can motivate you to make something new and change the world, change your reality. Okay, I think I made it all make sense. Who knows? Let me know in the comments if I did. And if you haven't, please like and subscribe. And if you like how the fact that I kind of mentioned comics and referenced Iron Man, check out my other YouTube channel I have. It's called Comic Books Transformed. Actually, I have 2 YouTube channels besides this one, Comic Books Transformed and The Lastercast. So if you like me, just go watch those 2. All right, thank you so much for your time.